Ready?
Yeah.
Charles Towns, a physicist emeritus at UC Berkeley, Nobel Prize for discovering the laser. I went to hear him speak one time a few years ago, and I was finished. He's a devout Christian, and I wanted to talk him into writing a foreword to my book on the mind-body problem. So I wanted, and I wasn't quite ready to do that yet, but I wanted him to remember me. So it was a small group of, maybe 50 or less students and professors in the section. And so after the lecture, there were just 2 or 3 of us professors standing around. But the students all asked questions. We waited until the students asked their questions, and a lot of the students were asking for his autograph. So when I kind of got up front, so I was the first one, so I said, I'd like your autograph too. And the other physicists, the professors looked at me, started scowling, and I pulled out my laser pointer and said, would you sign it on me with your laser pointer? Assuming that would be unusual enough that he would remember me. And the other physicist said, you're going to need a pretty powerful detector to read that. And he says, no, I'm going to go out superluminally and look at it whenever I want to from outer space, and so everybody got a chuckle. So then it was only, he was in his 80s or even maybe 90s then. So when it came time to ask him to write a foreword, he didn't remember me. I called him on the phone, but it didn't make any difference. He was all excited about writing the foreword for my book, so I sent him the manuscript, but he said, I agree with you in principle, but not the details, so he refused to write the foreword. But anyway, that was just a kind of just a little anecdote. But so you want to hear the story again about Copernicus? Is that?
Go on then. Who is Copernicus?
Huh?
Go on.
Okay.
We know about Copernicus.
All right. So what was the?
He waited for his deathbed.
You want to hear it, or?
Go on then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So. In answer to the difficulty in getting a new idea credibility, as Anton said, one death at a time it often takes until a new theory is given credibility. A major case in point is Copernicus's work on heliocentricity, and there's a footnote to it that I hadn't recalled. Hipparchus, 2,000 years before Copernicus, discovered the same thing that Copernicus did, that the orbits of the planets were not perfect circles. And he was so worried that they weren't perfect circles and that it went against the current thinking of that he threw it away. And he was such a powerful figure that it took 2,000 years till Copernicus to finally bring it up again in his way instead. And Copernicus, if you read the foreword to his book, something like his worries about the trouble it would cause, he's on his deathbed. It was like 30 or 40 years he had the manuscript in his drawer, and his friends finally published the book and brought him a copy. I think it was the day that he died, they gave him a copy, and then scientists at the time thought his premise was so absurd that he was a laughingstock for 75 years. Then when Galileo came along and started doing observations that actually were more empirically demonstrating that Copernicus was correct, we know from history that they wanted to kill Galileo, and he had to agree to recant and stay under house arrest. For now, a simple thing which to us is so obvious in modern times, but that seems to be typical of any new idea in physics especially. You can't, the bigger the new idea or the more radical the change, especially if it's a paradigm shift, it's almost impossible. We will accept a refinement, like a laser this big being made to a laser that big or twice as powerful. Since we already have the laser, we can accept a refinement. But the same thing, discovery of the laser, align, for example, I think I will align mirrors more perfectly than they have ever been in line. Insalata.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Is she the one? Or
No,
is it the other
Do
one?
you want me to do this bit?
Get a butt shot. No. So to say I'm gonna. I mean, the metaphor for the laser is so interesting. I'm gonna align mirrors more perfectly than mirrors have ever been aligned. I'm gonna take just a regular photographic flash lamp and a little bit of Nobel gas, and I'm gonna make a light explosion so powerful that it'll burn a hole in steel. What could be at that time? What could be more preposterous?
Are we being serious again?
No, that's a. Yeah, that's a. Don't you see the? That's a true description of the laser.
Oh, the laser. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And that's just how preposterous a new theory. People would think. Or at the time of Edison, every 10,000 electrical engineers, if there was such a thing, or scientists in the world, said a light bulb was impossible.
Yeah. But why does science not allow the investigation in a formal sense of alternative ideas? Why, if somebody wants to put forward an alternative idea, he's being made fun of? That is surely that is something fundamentally wrong. If this the idea of openness and questioning is being stopped. So why is that not allowed at the,
Well, you hit a nail on the head, because almost by definition, that is what science is supposed to be all about. The unbiased investigation of premises, but especially someone, the older gentlemen of science are the ones that are kind of in charge. They have the PhD students. They are so sure about work that they spent their whole life doing that any other idea, it's not possible that it's correct. I mean, even look at, I'd lost my notes because of leaving my computer in Orly, but even Brian Josephson, when he was a 22-year-old graduate student, and I forget who the big name physicist was, who he flagrantly said Josephson has no idea what he's talking about. It's totally wrong. And more than Josephson standing up to him, it's a credit to Josephson what I tried to say about his being an English gentleman. He very politely convinced the other scientists that that his work was correct, and then of course experimentally they proved it. But there seems to be no case in the history of science where a new idea has not been ridiculed.
What about old ideas? They get ridiculed as well.
They do, because then there's some people who the better the idea, like we talked about with Einstein, and things do move on. The pillars of science are superseded. So, if you have no ideas of your own, it seems like you have to tear down the great men to try to build up your own credibility. But yeah, it works. It works almost with any idea. Is constantly attacked.
Can I bring up an issue which Anton, part of what he was saying, is the issue of a preferred frame. That was part of what Anton was talking about, and a lot of people keep saying, "Oh, there's a preferred frame."
Yeah.
And then people who believe in Einstein's relativity, a lot of them say, "Oh, there's no preferred frame." In my story, I acted as a bad student in a lesson where they were teaching Einstein's relativity. The teacher was saying there's no preferred frame. I played up a little bit, and the teacher said, "All right, there is a preferred frame." And it's a lot of the argument with people who dispute with Einstein's relativity is that they believe in a preferred frame. And I can take it from a different aspect. From the philosophers of physics and science, what they look at is the idea of empirically equivalent theories. And some of them seem to be going a theory with a preferred frame at the moment is empirically equivalent to a theory without a preferred frame. And so you've got two theories which seem to be totally different, but they're saying that they're empirically equivalent. And sort of like my dispute with it is, before Einstein you would have said there's a preferred frame. Now Einstein's come along and a lot of people are saying there's no preferred frame, but there seems to be no reason for the change. And they seem to be holding on to saying both theories are empirically equivalent. So what? There's no reason to change from a theory with a preferred frame to a theory without a preferred frame, and there's been no experimental evidence for that doing so, as far as I can see. What are your sort of like thoughts on that?
Well, can I answer that?
Oh, you want to go?
Yeah. On the preferred frame, I just want to note that the GPS system is a heliocentric system. The preferred frame is the center of the Earth, by the way that it is designed.
Yeah.
And therefore, if I had to be on the satellite and watching the Earth orbit around me, I wouldn't be able to design the clocks as they are, designed here on Earth. So, therefore, the GPS, it's interestingly enough, GPS is never used as a proof for relativity. It only says it's an application of relativity.
So the issue really becomes about preferred frame. Does it exist or doesn't it? And has there been any experimental evidence to prove or disprove it?
Maybe talk about this a little. To my way of thinking, there's no way to do an experiment that can measure that unless, until we get a faster than light spaceship and we can go a couple hundred galaxies away or something.
Exactly. So Einstein seems to come up with this dream, this thought experiment, and it's never been tested.
Right.
So science isn't science if you're basing things on things that are not testable.
Right.
No, you can test it.
But we just can't do it yet.
I'm sure if you take a Michelson-Morley experiment, you put that into space.
Diavolo.
Yeah.
A hot one, yeah?
Diavola.
Yeah.
Ok.
Thank you.
4 formaggi.
Grazie.
Prego. Letizia.
Grazie.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, we were.
Yeah.
I lost it.
So the preferred frame issue about the Earth being.
Yeah, no, that was not it.
Well, let's.
Oh, correct. You can prove if you take a Michelson-Morley apparatus into space and put it into low Earth orbit, you will get. I predict you will get a positive result on the speed of the satellite relative to the Earth's surface, and you won't have a null result in space. That's a test I would, and unfortunately, the satellite that they sent up for the first LIGO experiments, they only have one pass. They didn't have the right angle pass, So unfortunately, it could have been resolved right now if they had enough money to put up the right angle path.
Yeah.
But I'm confident that the Michelson-Morley experiment will not return a null result in low Earth orbit.
And can I bring an issue? Not only is it not being tested yet, I think if they did do the experiment, whether they found a preferred frame or not, they would still say Einstein was right, because it's so ambiguous as what's being stated. It's just some people, a lot of people are interpreting Einstein's relativity as there's no preferred frame.
Bon appetit.
Bon appetit, yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that?
We're eating.
No, sorry.
No, that's okay. That's not.
Balsamico.
Oh, I thought it was olive oil.
Yeah, that's this one here.
I have a tendency to not want to believe that there is a preferred frame because, is that in a Big Bang cosmology? So we're going to say the Big Bang occurred in Alpha Centauri or something like that, and there's some drag into, I don't see where where we can't distinguish free fall in an elevator to gravitational. I don't see how we can, how it's possible to measure such a thing, and I don't. I have to look at Anton's premise a little bit for the Michelson-Morley apparatus to see if that changes my opinion of that, but I don't see what having a preferred frame. I don't understand what that could do to cosmology, but that's not. I believe in a multiverse. An infinite number of nested Hubble spheres, each with their own fine-tuned laws of physics. That dark matter, dark energy, is the gravitational balance of the cosmological constant for the rest of the matter in the universe. The causal connection is very weak, and so that's why a whole infinite multiverse beyond ours doesn't do much more than just barely oscillate the cosmological constant around zero. So in that type of an arena, I just, in view of my interpretation of cosmology, I don't see how a preferred frame is possible, whether there's a God or whether there's, I don't accept the Big Bang, but I guess the Big Bang says there was a singularity, but none of our observations in directionally in 360 degrees seem to, of course, ever increasing power to telescopes. The Big Bang, every time it starts to fail, they adjust the parameter. They just add something to it. So, if a more powerful telescope said it's 18 billion light years instead of 14.7, then. But at what point are there no more stars?
Well, I believe that we live on a three-dimensional surface of a sphere. Mm-hmm. So the Big Bang is nothing more than that sphere expanding. Mm-hmm. And on that premise, a photon or a light beam will go around the sphere. Uh-huh. So if you look long enough in one direction, you might start seeing your backside. Mm-hmm.
Einstein also postulated that.
Now, so basically, the universe might be completely finite. It just looks infinite to us because we're seeing the same. We're actually looking at the history of the galaxies that are closer to us, except we cannot line them up because light bends. So our first observation is from there. Our second observation is from there because of the way that the light paths got bent around space, and the third observation is from that angle. Mm-hmm. And in the theory that I have, the Big Bang, going from this something from nothing, which the current or this contemporary physicist says matter antimatter, but antimatter is just the same particle with the opposite charge. It's not an anti-energy. In the way that I think, there is an anti-energy. So initially you have positive and negative energy. I like the negative energy collapsed into a center. Because the only reason why I call that the negative energy, because I would prefer to live in the positive energy. And but the whole, if you look at this, and it collapsed in the center because it has to, due to gravitational forces. So one of them won the battle, and that the negative energy collapsed into the center. But if you think of this as a wave function, the momentum or the leverage, if you look at it in terms of a lever, so if you had this the stick with a pivot here turning, that all went in there, that has to go out to keep this whole thing on the same pivot point. So that is effectively the Big Bang. So one could argue that the expansion was 10 to the power of 38, which is the electrical and the gravitational differences, or ratio rather. Now, how does one bring in the continued expansion? Now, if as it expanded, this energy formed the galaxies, and this wave function sort of caused eddies, which are the galaxies, and sub-eddies, which are our solar systems, etc., etc. But that whole lot has a surface tension, which is gravity. But this gravity is continually reducing because of star activity, which is causing the photons to go out, and the photons, according to my theory, don't add to the gravitational effect. So the surface tension is continually being reduced, so it is basically the expansion of the universe is the entropy of the solar activity.
Oh, interesting.
This is how I see it. And
I also believe that we could look out and see the back of our head, but I don't do it from a two-dimensional surface. I still think it can occur in the way I fool with it. Which is another case of how similar ideas can be brought from so many different perspectives. They make good pizza.
It's going in my direction though.
What was yours called? A margarita or something?
It's the hot one, spicy one.
Oh, spicy one.
Yeah.
And those are like little salamis or
Yeah.
pepperonis? And you got the 4 cheese or something?
very nice.
Just go for my direction. I try to keep things simple. And sort of like one of the big fundamental issues I'm concerned with is the issue of a preferred frame. And it can mean different things to different people. But the reason for rejecting it doesn't seem to make sense. It's not something making sense from the people who say believe in Einstein's relativity. And they also have things like the cosmic microwave background now, and you think, well, you can use that as a frame of reference. And so in the issue of a preferred frame, that makes an even better one. So what is it with saying there's no preferred frame? Because obviously it seems obvious that there must be one. It's sort of like it's a state of denial by certain people.
Haven't the most recent observations of the cosmic microwave background shown it's the same in all directions?
It uses as a frame of reference.
No, but have they solved the ecliptic of our solar system and the ecliptic plane of the solar system is imprinted in this in the CMB, and which Krauss actually said that very nicely. That's Copernicus haunting us. Do you know if they've solved that?
I don't think so.
Anyway, I'll switch it off so we can talk about other things.
No, you start up again when you switch it off.